Now we're heading to an ag-focused science event at Lincoln University with Cosmo Kentish Barnes. He's with Emeritus Professor Keith Cameron from the Department of Soil and Physical Sciences.
Today we're holding a forum on nitrogen. This forum is organised by the New Zealand Institute of Agricultural and Horticultural Scientists to look at the details underpinning nitrogen and its use in agriculture, horticulture and its impacts on the environment.
And who is the audience today?
The audience is dominantly scientists because it's going to be a scientific debate about the details that underpin the nitrogen cycle, how nitrogen cycles through the atmosphere, soil, plant and animal systems, and looking to maximise the benefits from nitrogen whilst minimising the environmental impacts of nitrogen.
Who have you got talking today? Who's on the list, the speaker list?
So we've got Professor Richard McDowell, who's the Chief Scientist in our Land and Water National Science Strategy, Tim Davey from Environment Canterbury, Murray Close, Principal Scientist with ESR, Warwick Cato from Balanced Agri-Nutrients, Professor Jackie Keenan, who's from the Department of Surgery at the University of Otago, and she's going to be describing other colorectal cancer risk factors in Canterbury other than just nitrate in drinking water, which seems to be the concern. We have Mike Baer, Principal Scientist from Plant and Food, Alistair Black, Senior Lecturer at Lincoln University, Professor Jacqueline Routh from Lincoln University, and Emeritus Professor Alison Stewart, who's CEO of the Foundation for Arable Research.
Gosh, what a lineup!
We had quite a lineup, and I've just listened to some of the conversations on the way in, and people are saying how much they're looking forward to a rigorous debate.
Standing beside Keith is the organiser of the forum, Professor John Hickford from Lincoln's Department of Agricultural Sciences.
My job is to sort of oversee that the event occurs, keep the conversation civil but also detailed, and make sure that everyone goes away with something positive from meeting today. And my focus was, we think we know all the solutions when it comes to nitrogen and nitrate loss and water quality, but really we know so little, and so we need to have better discussions and confront the issues, talk about what we know and what we don't know, and we need to do it more regularly if we're going to solve the problems that we face.
And this forum is open to anyone, and in fact, as well as lots of scientists mingling in the foyer here, I can see some younger people coming in, some students.
Absolutely, we try and get the students here. We've got an issue recruiting into science at the moment, so getting the young ones here, that makes me feel good. We've got to change the balance. If you look around the room, you'll see there's a lot of, like me, stale pale males. But science is changing too, and I'm very keen to see young people engaging with these challenges if we want to continue the way we are in this country in terms of accruing most of our income from agriculture, but doing it in a responsible, sustainable, more sustainable way. That's what we need to do.
And the forum today is called Nitrogen, Friend or Foe. What's the meaning behind that kind of overriding title?
Well, so plants need nitrate to grow. So if a plant can't access a source of nitrogen, it can't grow, because nitrogen's part of protein and DNA in plants, and everything needs DNA. So you need nitrate for a plant to grow. So anything, be it a native forest or a production system on land, requires nitrogen to get into the system in some way. That can be naturally acquired nitrate that comes from the activity of microbes, but we can also add it as a synthetic fertiliser too. But obviously the moment you start putting nitrogen into a system, you can potentially lose nitrate out of the system, and it's nitrate that you lose, it's the oxidised form that's soluble. So nitrogen is at the heart and the core of life. Sometimes it goes where we don't want it to, and sometimes it comes from places where it's expensive, or we can't afford to use it, or whatever else, or we can't manage it effectively. And that's what Friend or Foe is about. Is some instances it's good, others it's bad.
There is huge amounts of work being done. Farmers are already making huge gains from what I see on the ground.
Yeah, look, I think one of the great things about New Zealand farmers is they've responded to so many of the environmental challenges that have come along. I'm seeing amazing things on farm. Their adaptability, the way they respond to the messages they're hearing. They feel very browbeaten, there's no denying that, but they're also responding really well. We should be proud of what our farmers do. I've always said that, because they are themselves scientists in their thinking, and they respond appropriately. There's very few that go to hell with it all, I'm going to ruin the planet. They're there trying to run a business with all the challenges that they too face in their business operation, including managing nitrogen.
Most of the speakers pivot between agricultural and environmental science, but Professor Jackie Keenan's focus is more aligned with human health.
So I'm a researcher in the Department of Surgery at the University of Otago, Christchurch, and I'm here today to talk about known risk factors for colorectal cancer in Canterbury. And I emphasise the word known because we've been actually looking at what might be driving the increased risk of early onset colorectal cancer, particularly that we're seeing in Canterbury, and we've been looking for the usual lifestyle risk factors such as sugary drinks and high fat and lack of exercise, alcohol, smoking, things like that. Coming here, for me, I am going to talk a little about nitrates because that's obviously been very much in the literature and it's the focus of this forum today. For me, it's a wee bit like tiptoeing through a minefield, but I'm hoping to just bring my knowledge, my understanding that it may be a risk factor, but it is one of many risk factors. And, you could get rid of all the nitrate in the drinking water in Canterbury and you will still have people developing colorectal cancer. And there's a whole lot that we need to understand about the different pathways that are involved.
Yes. So it would have been quite challenging putting together your talk today.
Absolutely. To say I'm apprehensive would be an understatement.
Yeah. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Okay, the forum is just about to start and the theatre is filling up quickly, so I might try and grab another interview at morning tea.
It's really exciting to see the work that's been done on that, but there is still a long way to go to reduce nitrogen leaking into the wider environment.
Tom Lambie is a familiar face to many at the forum.
I've been involved in the national level in Federal Farmers. I was Chancellor here at Lincoln, and I was also one of the commissioners for Environment Canterbury when a lot of the present plans were put in place.
Because of the noise levels in the foyer, we chat in the courtyard outside, and I ask him why he's attending this forum.
I'm a practicing dairy farmer, and nitrates and environmental improvement are extremely important, but also we've got to remain productive. We want to enjoy a rural community that is prosperous, but we want to do that in an environment that we can enjoy.
It's a challenging time for farmers.
It's a challenging time, but it's also an amazing time. Some of the technology and the tools that are coming to us make it a really exciting time to be involved in the industry. But what we've got to know is how to use them, and also, is it making a difference?
Yes.
And that's one of the large things. But I'm very conscious in water quality. We're talking today about nitrates. But as Tim Davies already pointed out, there's a whole lot of other things, phosphorus, shade, that go into making really good quality. And we need to make sure that we're doing our catchment work and making individual farming decisions, that we're looking for the best value for money to make the best outcomes. Nitrogen could be in some cases, could be other things in others, but today's fantastic.
Yes. Are you making a lot of progress on your farm in terms of some of these issues?
Yes, well, we're definitely looking at one of our biggest issues. We tend to be on heavier clayed ground, so we've got less of our nitrate loss issue to the groundwater, but we may have some denitrification and some volatilization going the other way. But we're really looking at everything that we can do to mitigate phosphorus loss, and also making sure that we're doing actually changing in farming practice to make sure that we're looking after the soil structure, because that's an incredibly important part as well. So it's fitting what's the best thing for each individual farm and each individual catchment.
Speaking from a fertiliser industry perspective is Warwick Cato, the Science Strategy Manager at farmer-owned cooperative Balance Agri-Nutrients.
I'm delighted to be speaking today to put a perspective around the tool nitrogen, and in particular nitrogen fertiliser, and put some perspective about whether it's a friend or a foe. And my conclusion is nitrogen is not a friend or a foe. It's the man or the humans that use it that are. And so the focus should be on practices and the people component, because that's what really determines the context in which you see nitrogen.
Yes. So what advice do you give farmers? How do you find that balance between productivity and environmental stewardship?
So you have to put it in the context of the farm system or the growing system that's there, and the values that the farmer or grower have, because you have the spectrum from, we have clients from very green to very right wing, and so your client base actually determines what their particular needs are. But most of them use nitrogen as to either boost yield or to address feed deficiencies in the system. And one of the comments is that hasn't changed since the 1920s, when nitrogen was actually first used in New Zealand. It was to make calving in the springtime safe for dairy farmers, and that's why they've used it. And interestingly enough, it was to make sure we had a continuous supply of butter so we could supply the UK market over a 12-month period, and it was also to reduce our cost structure and make sure our farming cost structure was globally competitive. And those reasons really haven't changed to today in the dairy context.
Even though you work for a fertiliser company, would you like to see farmers use less fertiliser?
We're decision support. We're decision support, not decision maker, and that's a really important distinction, that farmers and growers will do what they want to do. And essentially, at the end of the day, we can provide as much stewardship as we can, much advice, protocols, soil testing, but ultimately the excess or abuse or whatever you want to call it is ultimately driven by what the end user wants to use it, and that's the human element, you know.
Yeah, so you're providing the fertilisers, but at the same time you want farmers to apply it sustainably on their land.
Yeah. And so one of the good things that's happened in the last few years is the regen, the conversation around regen. And one of the good things about that is it's brought the focus back on to say, let's optimise how our clovers perform in our pastures first before we bring bagged fertiliser into the farm system. So I think it's actually been a good thing, because ultimately our cheapest feed comes from the natural legume in our system, and use nitrogen strategically. And ultimately, a lot of us in the industry are actually selling or involved in advising our brothers, our uncles, our cousins. And so there's quite a moral ethic to do the right thing, and also to think about who's our global competitor. It's not other farmers or NGOs, it's ultimately other countries, and our role is to make our farmers and growers globally competitive, and that hasn't changed in 100 years.
Yes, and that's important not just for farmers, it's important for all New Zealanders. It underpins our economy.
We've got to achieve environmental gains, so most of our R&D investment now is in terms of environmental enhancements and to provide farmers with the tools. So I use an analogy, we're like a garage. A farmer will come in and we want to have the best mechanics and the best suite of tools, but we won't dictate which tools or mechanic they use, and that's how we act in a decision support.
As everyone heads back into the lecture theatre after morning tea, I take Keith Cameron aside to ask him one more question. Are there concerns amongst scientists that this topic is not portrayed in a matter-of-fact way by the media?
There is concern. In science, of course, we work on the burden of evidence. What does evidence tell us? And the evidence tells us clearly that nitrogen is absolutely essential for all plants and all animals. Without nitrogen, we wouldn't be alive. And nitrogen can be added to the system in various forms, organic forms or mineral fertiliser forms. And really, it's about the management of those inputs to reduce the leakage from the system. Now, farmers, of course, don't want leakage from the system because it's uneconomic. It costs them money. So they are desperate to find ways that they can also reduce the leakage of nitrate from agricultural systems.
Yes, it's such a big and emotive topic.
Yes, it is an emotive topic because it affects health of people, and we need to get this right.
Emeritus Professor Keith Cameron ending that story from the Nitrogen Friend or Foe Forum, hosted by the New Zealand Institute of Agricultural and Horticultural Science. Cosmo Kentish-Barnes was also talking to Warwick Cato from Balance Agri-Nutrients, Professor Jackie Keenan from the Department of Surgery at Otago University, dairy farmer Tom Lambie, and Professor John Hickford from Lincoln University.